Part 1. Shadows of Hunger. The small, run-down apartment smelled of damp wood and old fabric, its walls thin enough to let in the bitter cold of the outside world. Lisa Morgan sat at the worn-out dining table, her trembling hands wrapped around a chipped coffee mug. The liquid inside had long since gone cold, but she clung to it, as if the warmth it once held could somehow seep into her bones and chase away the exhaustion gnawing at her. Her 4 daughters, Emily, 10, Sophie, 8, Lily, 6, and baby Rose, barely 3, were huddled together on a single mattress in the corner of the room. Lisa had done her best to tuck them in with the only blanket they had, but it was too thin to fight against the winter chill creeping in through the cracks in the walls. She exhaled slowly, rubbing her temples. She had barely scraped together enough money for rent this month, but food was another story. The pantry was nearly empty, save for a half-eaten loaf of bread and a single can of beans. Her minimum wage job at the diner wasn't enough. It was never enough. Lisa's stomach growled, but she ignored it. The girls needed to eat first. As she sat there in silence, a strange feeling settled in her chest, unease. It wasn't just the hunger or the cold, it was something else. A feeling she couldn't quite place. Then, the whispering started. At first, she thought it was the wind. But as she listened closer, she realized the whispers weren't coming from outside. They were coming from inside the apartment. Low. Faint. Unintelligible. Lisa's breath hitched. Her heart began to pound as she turned toward the girls. They were fast asleep, their soft breaths the only sound in the room. She clenched her fists, forcing herself to stay calm. Maybe she was imagining things. Maybe it was just the exhaustion playing tricks on her mind. But deep down, she knew better. Something was wrong. Part 2. The Unseen Presence. Lisa's fingers tightened around the chipped coffee mug, her knuckles turning white. The whispering had stopped as suddenly as it had begun, leaving behind an eerie silence that felt even more suffocating. She swallowed, her throat dry. Her gaze flickered toward her daughters, their small bodies rising and falling with steady breaths. They were undisturbed. Had she imagined it? No. She was exhausted, yes. Stressed, always. But she knew what she had heard. Slowly, she rose from her chair, careful not to make a sound. The wooden floor beneath her feet creaked ever so slightly, the noise unnervingly loud in the stillness of the night. Holding her breath, she scanned the dimly lit room. The apartment was tiny, just one main room with a kitchenette, a bathroom, and a closet by the front door. There was nowhere for someone to hide. But still, her eyes landed on the closet door. It was shut, just as it had been all evening. But now, standing here in the dark, she could feel something radiating from it, a coldness, a presence. Lisa hesitated. Her pulse thundered in her ears. She wanted to ignore it. To tell herself she was being paranoid. But she couldn't shake the feeling creeping up her spine. Taking a deep breath, she stepped forward and reached for the closet handle. The second her fingers brushed against the metal knob, a faint rustling sound came from inside. Lisa snatched her hand back, her breath catching in her throat. Her mind scrambled for a logical explanation. Maybe it was just a rat. Maybe something had fallen from the top shelf. But deep down, she knew it wasn't that. For a long moment, she just stood there, frozen. Then, before she could talk herself out of it, she turned the handle and yanked the door open. Nothing. The closet was empty except for a few old jackets hanging limply and a pile of shoes on the floor. The dim light from the kitchen barely reached inside, casting deep shadows in the corners. Lisa let out a shaky breath, feeling foolish. Just my nerves. She was about to close the door when something caught her eye. The shoes. She frowned. They weren't where she had left them. She was sure of it. Her heartbeat stuttered. Before she could process the thought further, a sound came from behind her, a whisper right by her ear. Lisa spun around, her pulse spiking with terror. No one was there. But the whisper had been real. She knew now, without a doubt, that she and her daughters were not alone in this apartment. 3. The shifting shadows. Lisa's breath came in short, shallow gasps. Her fingers trembled as she reached for the edge of the closet door, pulling it shut with a quiet click. The whisper, so close, so real, still echoed in her mind. She turned toward her sleeping daughters. The old mattress barely fit all 4 of them, their small bodies huddled together for warmth. None of them stirred. They hadn't heard the whisper. Lisa pressed a hand to her chest, trying to steady her racing heart. She needed to be strong. Whatever this was, exhaustion, stress, something worse, she couldn't let it consume her. The girls needed her. A sudden thump sent her spinning toward the kitchen. The pantry door was open. Lisa's stomach clenched. She had closed it earlier. She was sure of it. Forcing herself to move, she stepped forward cautiously, her bare feet soundless against the cold floor. The pantry was nearly empty, just the half-eaten loaf of bread and the lone can of beans. But something felt off. She knelt down, peering into the shadowed corners of the small space. Nothing. Her fingers brushed against the bread, and she startled. It was damp. Lisa recoiled, her mind racing. How? There was no leak. No spilled water. And then she saw it. Faint, smeared prints on the floor. Not footprints. Handprints. Small. Almost childlike. A chill ran down her spine. Something was wrong with this apartment. Suddenly, behind her, baby Rose whimpered in her sleep. The tiny sound shattered the silence like a gunshot. Lisa turned swiftly, rushing to the mattress. Rose's tiny hands twitched, her face scrunching in discomfort. Then, she started whispering. Lisa's stomach dropped. The whisper was low, broken, unlike the babbling of a toddler. It was rhythmic, deliberate, as if she were reciting something. Lisa leaned in closer, her skin crawling. The words made no sense. A language Lisa didn't recognize. She gently shook Rose's shoulder. "Sweetheart, wake up," she whispered. The moment Lisa touched her, Rose stopped. Her breathing evened. Her body stilled. The room was silent again. Lisa sat back, pulse hammering. She needed to leave. She needed to get her daughters out of here. But before she could even move, the whispering started again. This time, it came from every corner of the room.